Okay.
Okay.
And
Should we
15
pause
years later,
and start the meeting officially?
prostate cancer operation. And
What meeting are
there was some
She got revenge.
leftovers back there.
Now they have a
Yeah,
quorum,
okay.
but I'm not paying
That
attention.
looks like David.
Greg, you're muted.
Did David join us?
Oh, there you are. Alan, would you call the meeting to order, please?
Sure. I call the planning board meeting to order at 6:51. Roll call vote, please, Greg.
Yeah, okay. Karen?
Karen O'Neill here.
Yeah. David? Can you hear me, David? David? Okay, I'll move on. Bill?
Yes.
Deb?
Yeah,
Jane? Jane, unmute.
Yes,
Thank you, Jane.
sorry about that.
No worries. Mike
Present.
and Lynn?
here.
I think I got everybody. Did I miss anyone?
Yes,
Let's make sure David's really here.
David is here. He was just there. Yeah, he's here. I muted him. David, can you unmute yourself? There you go. David?
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
All right,
Thank you
this
very much.
this meeting is being recorded and will be posted with a link on our website to our YouTube channel. Okay, onward. Mary, you're up.
Do you want me to keep
Maybe we
going,
should
or do you
start
wanna
from the
go-
beginning.
Yeah, go. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, go back to the beginning, by all means.
Okay, so what I'm doing is sharing the initial timeline that obviously will be tweaked an awful lot, but this is where it is after conversations with the chairs of the work groups. The education conversation, I made it clear that identifying teachers and determining meeting dates is what has to happen first. The disciplines included would be English, math, science, social studies, health, PE. I stuck sports in there too, because sports was considered one as well. Related arts, special ed curriculum coordinators, and including both middle and high school level teachers. Determining questions for the staff groups. And then there was a question coming out of Bill's email that I had about whether there is an interest early on. I would think if you're going to do it, I would suggest making that decision very quickly, because I think it will be really important to share that there is such a task force with the staff. And they may even want to have a role in that process. So I hope that decision could be made very, very quickly. In terms of the PowerPoint committee, I spoke with Greg. There's been a preliminary meeting already to clean up the old and consider what should be added. And it will take several meetings between now and launch date for the survey. And that would incorporate findings from meetings with staff. And it may not be June, it may be later than that in light of what I've been hearing tonight. But this is a work in progress. For the survey, Karen was talking about really needing to make sure that people in the community have more of a base of knowledge, just as Debbie was saying also, and what that will look like. So they would want to start meeting, I would assume, very early to think about how to capture that and how to inform that. In terms of public relations, same point, people need more information to answer the survey questions. With a message like a new vision is possible, what could a new reality look like? And various ways to get the word out. Signs at IGA, HAI radio station, public service announcement, Montague's public TV, channels 22 and 20 and 40 in Springfield, with short announcements for schools, schools to blast the information, bulk mail to everyone in town. And obviously the committee the committee would be discussing all of those different vehicles. And then school facilities tours was a suggestion also as a way to help really inform people about the process. I also talked with both superintendents, Gil Montague, Brian had given some thoughts at our last meeting, but he also offered his sense of the background, his background and involvement. And he suggested that before convening, we meet with central office staffs from both districts. So I had tried to reach Patricia prior to speaking with Brian. I did reach her after speaking with Brian, and she thinks that's not a bad idea, but wants central office staff within Pioneer Valley to meet first with me to talk about this. And then, so that means the last week of April, what we've got planned now is a meeting with the Pioneer Valley administrative staff on the 28th, I believe, at 2:00 to gather their perspectives and consider how, I mean, I wrote this actually before the input from Bill about the potential task force, because I think that might be woven into this. Consider how to identify teachers and how to determine the best meeting dates. And then the meeting of the education committee, I added this after seeing Bill's email and just wanting to have a placeholder in here, including what came, this italicized language is right out of the Mars study. And then the meeting of the Public Relations Committee would need to happen to begin, start planning a strategy. And then May, I don't know whether you have enough time, Debbie, between now and the end of of April to get something like that scheduled. May, I would think, we're hoping that May 5th might be a date for the two administrative staffs to talk together. And I entered in there with the Ed Task Force, but definitely with me and I don't know who else would want to be involved. Maybe it's just me, and that's fine. But obviously would like to hear from anybody else. I'm hoping that the week of May 9th may work to have start the conversations with teachers, 9th, 10th, 11th. I'm not available until the 19th and 20th the following week, but I would throw out all of those dates to get started, just to try to gather as much information by the 20th of May, which is still pretty late, given what you want to try to do, but we'll just try to pack as much in as possible. And I just included here things that would need to happen in May would be the Public Relations Committee, possibly hosting tours of schools, the survey committee, developing the survey template, and the Education Task Force processing findings prior to the June survey launch. All right, so that's the outline, how, kind of broad outline of what I captured from you. Shall I stop sharing?
You might want to just leave it up. Well,
Okay.
okay. Yeah, just I'll let Bill jump in. Just, an initial thought was that we're still trying to get people to understand what this is about and get, some more information about what could be. And I'm wondering if part of this process, as we're finding out, what we might be able to do with schedules and educate people and, share information, that would be informing them that we would be forming a task force. We'll be looking for volunteers and, we'll share everything that we have to date. But, the next step in the process would be expanding this and having a task force get into more of the nitty gritty and, kind of set the stage for that at all levels, Board of Selectmen, administration, teachers, general public, and so forth. So that's just some initial thoughts.
So to really launch the task force after this step, like maybe more like the fall.
Yeah, set the stage for it, right.
Can I ask a silly question? And I don't know the answer to this, Pioneer is looking for a new principal?
Yes,
Yes.
So all of this is occurring, but we don't even know who their principal is next year.
correct.
They
That
have,
that
who's
doesn't matter. That doesn't matter.
oh, of course it
We
does.
we also know that when all of the information that was forwarded, excuse me for interrupting you, but honestly, I'd like to talk to Mary. But, if you look at the consultant's report, there is a principal and a superintendent that responded, and they're not there either. So we have new superintendents, a recently assigned superintendent, and now a couple of new principals. It really doesn't change the equation of what we're trying to do. But Mary, and is that okay, Deb? Do you mind if I go on? Mary, thanks a lot. In our discussion and also my reaction over a couple of meetings as they got close to the end was the potentially a perception that we were kind of muddled. So when you were talking about, when I was talking to you about, and thank you for calling me so I could talk to you about talking superintendents, I also talked about starting at how my process was to start at the top and make sure that I got assurances that I could go to the next level down. But I also was aware of the education task force. And it seems to me that as a committee, we've been kind of going in the direction of the education task force, but through its component parts. And that's fine with me too. But I just wanted to bring it forward that what we are actually doing is not totally disorganized or off the line of attention, but it isn't all at once. That's a good thing because I still have questions about, because we've been, not the timelines or whether a superintendent or central office staff wants to be informed first or later. They'll all get the same information, but that when it comes to the teachers, we've offered a stipend, and I don't think that we're really having a realistic approach to the time frame that we can afford. So that's a blurry issue for me as to how many staff are going to be involved and in what direction. And then secondarily, I think everybody has to, I was hoping initially that because superintendents work year round, given that this is school vacation, you could, and we have a tight timeline, however you look at it, that they would be able to meet with you this week. Instead, they can't. And instead, one superintendent has pushed it back into May. And when you get, if you look at the school schedules, I think that in May, if I'm not correct, and I may not be, you're dealing with some MCAS tests and some other tests that relate to going on to college or just graduating high school. And you're going to run into a lot of conflict for people's time and energy in that period of time. And then you get through that and you're going to be at the beginning of June when you have graduation and the prom. And then you get to the middle of June and it's the last day of school and everybody's off contract. And that changes the whole scenario of who's available and who isn't. So I see our time frame as very compressed in terms of what we hope to get done. And my aim, and this is only my aim, it's not the whole committee's, is to get as far through people being able to give us, this committee, a recommendation by the end of this grant, or some activity that gives us an inclination to make some kind of decision one way or another, to recommend or not recommend or continue this process into another year. And that's That's the whole envelope from Bill. Thank you very much.
It-
Yeah, I would just like to add that we have town meetings coming up in May and June, and we're trying to get a budget through as school committees, that we are conducting interviews for a superintendent. We have an interim superintendent right now, and those interviews are going to be the first week of May. We are looking for a new finance director, business manager, whatever you would like to call it, as well as a new principal. So we have a lot of balls in the air as far as Pioneer and the administration and the school committee's time as well.
Mike? You're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, number one, I think Bill made a number of very powerful points there, and I don't want to. He's suggesting that we need to push ahead on some things, and I think he's probably right, and I don't want to slow us down. I put my hand up on the topic of the survey, just because I'm not clear in my own mind what the purpose of this survey is. As I see it, in terms of getting information out to the public, an important component of that, there are two important components of that, which I don't think we have yet. One is the results of this task force. In other words, whatever picture they come up with what a combined district program, educational program
Right.
might look like, okay?
Mhm.
And the other is answers to the questions that have already been generated by the previous set of public forums. Because I think that any information that we put out should try as hard as possible to cover all the bases that people have already raised as things
Mhm.
that are on their minds as concerns. And I'm wondering if having those things done is important before people take the survey. Because I think if it is, then expecting the survey to be done, I think Alan's right. If we're going to wait until we know the results of the task force and we have the questions answered, and given the fact that summertime is not a great time to do things, we're looking at next fall. And I'm wondering if we're looking at next fall for the survey as well, or whether there's a reason to think that it should be done sooner. But I don't want that to distract from what Bill is saying, because Bill's talking about getting the results of the task force. And to me, that is a major job that does need to be done well. And if to do that, it also needs to be done quickly, then we should focus on that.
Yes, and if we're gathering information, answering questions, and sharing that in whatever formats, then maybe the survey is almost complete and needs some touching up. But we might be in a place that in September, when people are back, and we have a review, get some emails out, get material out for people to be updated, and then give the survey. I think what we learned last time was people didn't have enough information, and that's what they shared. They were taking a survey and they were basically coming to the meeting to find out what they might need to know to complete the survey, or they did the survey before they even came to the meeting. So we need to, learn from that and get that right. I see Deb's hands up. Mike, do you have more, or do you want to put your hand down and we'll go to Deb?
That was just one of the comments from, I know some of the staff, is that the survey was just done in a very hurried manner. And they wanted to be more deliberate and so forth. So that was just one of the staff's comments, was it kind of came and went. And so I don't know what the time frame is with Mary, with a survey and data collection and so forth, because certainly that's something that we would be concerned with. But yeah, I just tossed that out as that was one of the staff's concerns about a
Yeah,
survey.
And one of the things that was mentioned in the report that Bill directed us to was even the Mars had on several occasions, caution is my word, they didn't use that word, but just kept emphasizing that, you know, they really had a very, very small, they used the word very small sampling of, you know, a parent or a teacher or an administrator. And so, you know, to base, let's say a suggestion on a parent from a comment that one parent made or one administrator made. I said, we have to, take that with a grain of salt. And I think some of the things that Mary uncovered going out and talking to people is there was some consistency, although that was such a very small sampling. We did hear that echo from other folks. So it would be helpful if in this process of conversations and meeting with small groups, that we get a much better understanding of how prevalent, a feeling is around a certain concern. So, Bill, do you want to, can we loop back to you, Bill? Do you have any other things, having heard, what people have shared? Do you want to talk some more about what your thoughts are and how you think we should proceed? I mean, I kind
No,
of threw out. Go
I
ahead.
really want to defer to Mary and think where she's going and has anything that she's heard clarified, or does she need to ask another question of me? And I'll just be as oblique as I can.
I do have a question for you, Bill, and that is, I think what you're saying is gather the information you can at this point. Do we let people know that a task force will likely be created shortly that would continue this work and elaborate on this work? And if so, what would the time frame for that be? Is the assumption that that would begin in the fall, potentially with a certain superintendent for Pioneer Valley and new principal perhaps, but those people at least will be in their positions. Is that something that you would encourage at this stage, letting
No,
people know?
I honestly think that the task force is a long-term type commitment. And it involves the buy-in of both superintendents because they're the ex officios, but they're the chairpersons they're running the meetings. So they either have to be there or not. But in any event, I think that the course that you're taking right now is perfect. And I just hope that we can get enough participation from as many groups as you've tried to focus on. And the smaller the groups, the better, I think. We need to encourage the staff to pretty much take it on their own, to commit an hour or so to get together with the other side. But if we can, going from the top down and getting recommendations as to who in your staff might be amenable to this, getting direction from them as to people to include, I think would be the fastest way to move on. And from there, it's just a matter of running out of time.
Right.
So
Right.
thank you.
So the idea then would be really to let some of the other work group work not be the focus, but get the collecting of the information that I really devote my time to hearing from the stakeholders in the school and not worry about the messaging around a survey because that could be in the fall. Is that what I'm hearing accurately, that we don't need to rush the PR or the survey, but do that very deliberately once you've heard from the staff and really have that much more information to share with the community and then gather the thinking of the community? Am I accurate in hearing that?
Yeah, I think so. And I'm going to let Deb comment on that. Deb, you're on mute. I wonder if through that process, though, we should be getting information out on what we're doing so that people, the public is being aware of, meetings and conversations and what we're looking at and potentially forming a task force and so forth. Deb, your
Just
hand
a
is up.
couple questions. Mary, as we were talking about task force, it is probably important for staff to have input as to who they think should be on that task force.
Right.
I think that's really the key, is to ask the superintendents, who are they comfortable with being on the task force? I think it needs to be a buy-in by all the participants, if that's what we're going to do, of have this task force of, yes, we want a faculty member from each school, we want a principal from each school, we want a whatever that is. But I think it would be important to ask, when you go to these central office meetings, who do they think is appropriate on it? If people aren't even agreeing who they think is appropriate on a task force, that's something that we would have to think about as to, and then in the end, and Greg might know the answer to this because he's on the select board, I know at least, is where's the power now? Does the power stay with this committee? Is the power transferred to a task force? Do we have two separate jobs? I'm just curious, is there overlap? Is there, so that's my only thought on that.
No, there isn't.
Was for Karen talking about, when you're talking about the survey, is once again, how much knowledge you have about the other system, I think is important as a survey question. And I know I've said this before. Have you walked in the other building? Have you actually, if you haven't, then that's a very interesting note to put on a survey. If you've never seen the other building, then how do you know what their kiln is about, type thing. So somewhere at the beginning of that, Karen, I would think that, like you said, you're trying to figure out not only who's filling out the survey, but what do they really know?
Mhm.
Yeah. Greg, you want to jump in on there? And she brought up a couple of points that you could clarify regarding planning board and task force activity.
Yeah, I mean, the planning board, it doesn't get transferred back to select boards. We would be charged with making a recommendation and also coming up with some sort of district agreement, which I'm assuming we would have to get some help from outside consultants to do that. But no, Mary, I think you got the right idea. It's really important to get the information that we need from both districts to have a clear picture as to what a combined district can offer. Because what we didn't glean from the surveys the last time was thinking about parents and, especially families that are sending their students to these respective districts. They know what they know, and that they're not really informed in terms of what other alternatives there are, or what a combined district would look like, and how that would be very different than what their child is receiving right now in education, especially at the middle and high school. So it's really important to have that part done, partly because even with our PowerPoint, I mean, one thing that we talked about on Monday was there's a lot of families that don't really understand why we're even doing this. They don't understand what the other alternatives are. And we talked about what those other alternatives might be. They might ask questions like, well, why aren't we doing a bigger district, right? It might be really, and this is to Mike, Mike was sort of the impetus for this, but the alternatives would be for them to stay separate. And what does that mean? And it means that it would be financially probably pretty difficult, especially for Pioneer. But I think down the road, I don't think the financial situation in relationship to the education is going to improve that much for Montague unless something drastically changes with population moving out here. A lot of this is based on, we've lost just a lot of population. And as much as we want to think that people are moving out here from Boston, that would be great, but is that really going to outpace what's happening economically and with the amount of students that we've lost in these districts? So some of the other options would be they don't do anything. So, possibly they wind up tuitioning into other districts if their enrollment gets so low that they can't sustain themselves. They need to hear those things and then understand why our charge is a very specific charge, which is that this is a politically sort of feasible thing that we can do here. We have six towns that are sort of contiguous. And that's why, it was the idea of the last superintendent, but I mean, he was looking at it from the political side. What are the political hurdles that you have to jump over? And I think that was to Brian's point as well. What are some of these political hurdles? And if we can spell those out, it gives a clear picture as to why we're doing what we're doing. And I think that was a really good conversation we had on Monday about this, because if they understand what the other options are, and we can put that in a PowerPoint with the combined district offerings that we're saying, look, this has been our charge. We are to look at the feasibility of these 6, now 5 with, Warwick tuitioning in. What does that look like? Not what it looks like with, if we want to go for a comprehensive Franklin County, everybody joins. I mean, it's highly, highly unrealistic to think we could politically pull that off, right? It just, you would have to get the other districts to go along, which they probably wouldn't. And so this is what we've got. And if we can frame that in terms of the other options they have, it begins to clear up for those parents and those that are coming down, the road that have younger children. Oh, I see what's going on now. I see why they're doing this and why they're showing us what the offerings are. We didn't know. We just know what we have. So anyways, I'll stop talking there. But to me, what you're saying is very important. Get that done, because the PowerPoint that we decide to develop has to be brought into that larger context and then give exactly the information that you're trying to get right now and feed that in within that context. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm going to call on you, Mike, in a second. Just to be clear that that we're collecting information and we're moving forward in that direction in this realm. The purpose of the task force, and this was outlined in the Mars report, where they actually, listed the different things the task force should be doing, not just the composition, is to, if we look at the things the planning board is supposed to consider when we are going to make a recommendation to move forward or not move forward, that's going to be, that information we're going to be getting from the task force, as well as all the information we had previously from consultants and Mary and so forth. So we will have their report and their findings. And if that task force is set up according to sort of like the guidelines that Mars put out, these are the areas you should be digging into, then they'll be giving us that information. We will then be taking all that under consideration. And then, because it's the power of the planning board that will be making a recommendation to the community, not the task force. So I just want to sort of make sure we understand we're still the ones that have to make the recommendation. I guess it's probably pretty obvious, but I don't want to blur that. Mike?
Yeah, I just want to respond a little bit to what Greg just said, because I think he gave a pretty good recap of our meeting. But some of that was opinion, and we do have different opinions on our little work group. And we have not resolved those opinions. I mean, that's fine. That's why there's 3 of us. And we haven't really worked through all that. So I think the real takeaway is that we did decide that it's important to tell people kind of why are we here. And we are here because there are perceived problems with the existing districts. And this combining regions is is one option for, dealing with those problems or challenges. But there are other options. And we, one of the sort of, I think, useful points of our discussion Monday was to say it would be really good to, mention those other options too. And I think I'm maybe not quite as negative as Greg is on some of the other ones, but again, that's where the opinion comes in.
It's not so much negative, it's just being honest with the political hurdles. I mean, each one brings different political hurdles, and some are, I think, would be perceived as being a little more challenging. Doesn't mean that they're not, they may not be what the public wants. So
Right.
I'm not in disagreement with you.
And in any case, sort of laying out, well, here we are, people think that there are challenges with the existing system, and here's what we think are possible ways to deal with those. And we were asked to study, this particular one, which is why we're going to make a recommendation on that. But there's other ones out there, just so you know. And because I think, the questions were raised, I think, Jane asked pretty early on, why aren't we looking at a region that for all of Franklin County? And the answer basically is because that's not what we were asked to do. Not because it's not a good idea.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, we had another group up in the Berkshires, and I thought there were 8 communities that had visited us. Greg and I talked to them some time ago, and they were asking how we did the process. And I think I got a message from Greg that they had like leapfrogged us, and they're already, now they may have financially had other issues that really kind of forced it. But the point is, it's not impossible, but their motivation may have been a lot more dire financially.
They had 18 towns. So
wow.
Yeah, 54 members on their board. And I think you're right, Alan. The financial situation was so bad, they were all on the same page. They knew that they had to do something. They quickly formed work groups and needed to move as quickly as possible to get to their recommendation.
Yep. Deb, and then I'm going to go to Mary Deb, you're on mute. So then I'm going to go to Mary to ask you, Mary, to jump in and share, is any of your thinking changing as a result of this conversation? Or, you're still comfortable with moving forward with what you laid out? Deb?
I was just make a quick comment with what Greg said about the 18 towns out there. I think the biggest hurdle and it's the, whatever in the box is the socioeconomic differences that people perceive between Gil Montague and Pioneer Regional. And I think the Berkshire schools, probably all 18 towns, have a more similar possibility socioeconomically. And so they don't perceive that as something that's a stumbling block. And I think once again, going back to whatever, it is a perception that's out there. And I think that's, to be honest with you, I think it's one of the biggest stumbling blocks that somehow as we go to task force and PowerPoint and whatever, to not address it at all would be a false. I mean, it's there. There was one brave faculty member up at Pioneer who at the very end said, do you think there's fear and anxiety about the diversity? And I applauded her. I saw her afterwards and I said, thank you for bringing that up because no one wants to say it. And it's out there. It's out there and it just, in any case. But that's why with all 18 towns, probably a lot closer than just 6 towns, possibly.
Debbie, I do think that sentiment came through in many of the survey responses, the fear. Yeah. Alan, in answer to your question, I definitely am hearing that the most important work between now and the end of June is gathering as much thinking and putting heads together around what it could look like, and much less about, at least from my focus, about the messaging around it. I do assume that the work groups, the PR group and the survey group could be meeting, but the urgency of that shifts to a later time when we have the information from the stakeholders who participate in the coming couple of months. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it takes a little pressure off everybody not to try to get all this done at a very, very busy time of the school year, not to try to be surveying parents when their kids' academic year is winding up and they're, thinking about all of the transitional experiences then.
So Mary, as you're sharing, let me just jump in so I don't lose this thought, but I want you to continue. So as you're sharing and getting information, if you pass that on to the respective working groups, the PowerPoint, to Deb, the things that people are asking or want to know more about, then they can start to be working on a survey because
Yes.
you're identifying the topics in the areas of concern to start thinking about how to frame those questions.
Absolutely. I would expect to take copious notes and share those findings with you, all of you, as soon as I can, following each session. If you'd like, I mean, I could summarize it a little more than that, but maybe you can tell me how you'd like it, and if it's too much or if it's too little, or however you'd like it.
Well, you can talk about that with the working group leaders on
yes,
what
great.
they'd be looking for.
Good. Great. Does that sound like the appropriate direction to everybody? Great.
Mhm.
I'm seeing thumbs up overall. Yep. So it looks good. Mike, is your hand up for?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, it is, Alan, because what you just said got me a little confused. My understanding is that Mary's going to be talking with, I guess we're calling them task force members now,
No,
about.
I don't think so.
No.
No.
Go ahead, Mary.
I'm not hearing that. I'm hearing
No.
that the task force is a future entity.
Yeah.
But today it's sharing even the thinking around the task force, especially, well, with the educators. Let them know that that's something that would
So
be
you're
down the
going to be
road.
talking with educators about the existing systems at the schools and what might be possible in a combined district,
Right,
right?
right.
Okay, which makes sense to me. That sounds great. I do think that's an important thing to do, and that's great. But what Alan was talking about was groups that were going to be raising concerns that would need to be addressed. And I'm wondering, I guess I'm not sure how that fits in with what my understanding of what you're going to be doing.
Yeah.
To me, that comes more out of after you're done, you produce your results, we've gotten information out to the public, and then we're hearing from the public about concerns, some of whom may be teachers or administrators or wherever, but it just, I was seeing that as being kind of a separate thing, and I wasn't sure if I was confused or what.
No, so let me just say that when Mary's meeting with groups, I think it's unrealistic to think that they're not going to also want to share what's on their mind. And we don't want to limit them to say, oh, no, the only thing we're talking about is, what could you have, for scheduling, and what could you, I think you have to leave that door open for conversations. And I just
Okay.
think it's going to come up
That's
naturally.
reasonable.
And if it does, it might, for example, if she shares some of that with you, it might give you some, thought for pause about, gee, is there something that you might include in a PowerPoint? That doesn't mean you have to, but you're sort of keeping track of that we might want to make sure that we address if we're putting together later on what a PowerPoint might look like. That's all. Mary, do you want to, does that sound reasonable, Mary?
Yes, it definitely does. And I think it's a much more realistic schedule now. There's, yes, the work of the work groups will be informed along the way about what's happening, but there isn't the pressure to have the right survey at the moment until the time has gone into really hearing the people within the systems. And I do think we're going to hear about hurdles that they think would need to be overcome in order to make it successful. So I think that will all be there. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of
just,
sense.
I mean, again, to clarify, would those become, because we have a working group working on addressing questions and concerns that came out of the previous forums. Would things like that come up in what you're about to do, Mary, be more appropriately handled by that working group? I mean, would they just be sort of bundled into what's already been identified? Some of them might be the same as have already been identified.
All right, tell me about the questions and concerns work group. Is that a different group?
Yes. So that's was Greg and I forget who else, but we were basically going to look at the questions that came up before.
Jennifer, right?
And we're going to answer those on the website. And I think what Mike is bringing up is, as those come up in your conversations, then we'll add those to the questions and answers, to making sure that those also get posted on the website. Out of that, however, may be a topic that we say, geez, we need to delve into this to educate or to inform or whatever in a PowerPoint. I wouldn't worry about that right now, but it might be worth making note that, boy, this comes up a lot. And so we might want to include this in a PowerPoint. That's all, Mike. It's sort of looking at it from a higher level and to see if we're gleaning something that
right. Well, I would say that
to the level.
In terms of providing information to the public, the PowerPoint should certainly address. I mean, I agree completely. PowerPoint should address questions and concerns that have been raised by the public. And I just want to clarify that, you guys are going to collect questions, come up with answers, come back to this committee with what you propose to put on the website before it goes there, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Alan?
Deb, yes.
I was just going to say, I think one of the things that, because Karen and I were there and Bill, and by the way, Alan, I'll get those questions to you and Greg this weekend, the exact questions. But Mary's going to have a more intimate group. And so when you have an entire faculty, no matter what people think, they might not feel comfortable raising their hand in front of the entire faculty of their school. Yet sitting with Mary and maybe 2 teachers from each school, just the size of the group and the conversation that occurs will raise other questions that weren't raised in this larger group.
Agreed. Good point. So I think we might be, we may have handled all the business that we needed to, and other than, Greg, there are no minutes. Is that correct to approve? Just so
I don't know when we're going to get those darn minutes done.
Okay, that's fine.
My busiest time of year. I'm barely keeping my head above water.
Yeah, I'm only bringing it up because it's on the agenda, so I want it in the record that we didn't forget that we will be approving those at a later date.
I know my schedule clears out a little bit after next weekend. This next week is just crazy for me. So,
okay. Is there anything else? I don't want to feel like I'm closing the meeting if people have other things they want to say. Mary, Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, just wondering. I mean, I think we've given Mary a good track to follow. Sounds like we've made some progress there. But in terms of answering the questions, that's not. I mean, other than collecting more questions, that's not something that really involves Mary because we're the ones that presumably know the answers to the questions.
Right.
So. In terms of moving ahead, should we talk a little bit about timing on that? I mean, I'm guessing, for example, I'm wondering if, do we want to wait until she's done with this process so that we kind of have everything collected before addressing them? Or do you guys want to start going over what we have already and coming up with proposed responses so that we can kind of be working along so that as soon as possible, we can get something that the group thinks is appropriate up on the website?
Yeah, we shouldn't be
And
waiting
I
for the
just heard
last
Greg say
minute.
he's pretty busy, so I
Yeah,
want to be respectful of his time.
yeah.
'cause-
We're not going to be doing that in the next week or so, but the point is that we have a lot of questions. We can start that process. We can answer the ones that we have. As new ones come up, we'll take our stab at answering those. And at some point, we'll start sharing those with the full group. And that may not happen until, we convene after the summer and, we might have a meeting just dedicated, sending out the questions and answers and having people look at those. And then we come back and say, are you happy with 1 to 10? And we may say, okay, everything looks good, but 3 and 4 need more work. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much.
Yeah.
So that'll be a work in progress.
Okay, well, I'd say, I mean, not to push necessarily, but to try to move things along. I mean, I do, again, before the PowerPoint can be done, I think we need to clarify what those answers are. And so if, to hear that, well, we might not start even deciding that till the fall, well, that means the PowerPoint won't be done at the beginning of the fall. When will it be done? I mean, if things could start earlier and, we could be in a position to have those questions answered by late summer or middle, whenever. I'm just thinking, I think Bill kind of lit a fire in my mind under us earlier by saying, we can't leave everything till the last minute here.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
I
Agreed.
actually think it
That'll be
probably
work
makes
in progress.
sense for the work groups to continue meeting on a monthly basis or however regularly, just to, I'm sure that PR has plenty to talk about in terms of figuring out ways to inform the community. And
Yeah,
if you
well,
wanted
Mike,
to plan.
I was going to say, Mike, I think we have things that we can be doing. I mean, I do think it's important to come up with those other options that the towns might pursue,
Yeah.
so that they have a picture, a clearer picture as to why we're doing what we're doing and why this is our charge. So I think that's one. And it'd be interesting to hear other people's thoughts on that. I mean, we put forth a few ideas in terms of, they can stay separate, but what does that mean? They could try to go bigger. What does that mean? And what districts are we talking in that respect? What are the other options? What if one becomes so financially strapped that they get forced into receivership and the state takes over? What does that mean?
Right. Oh, no, you're absolutely right. We have stuff we can be doing.
And so that would frame it. We can go back to the past PowerPoint, and there's going to be slides in there that are going to be relevant still in terms of what we found from the past in regard to the respective districts. So that's fine. What we don't have is the things that will be coming in the next month or two in terms of what's possible with a combined district. And that can be, that can be inserted either, we'll have to figure out where. It may make logical sense to put it after we look at the respective districts. But,
Right. Well, I think we need to do a little work on what we found so far too.
Yeah.
That's why we're going to have more meetings.
I love meetings. Can't get enough of them.
All right, so that's going to be
Especially
the
with
working
Mike.
group. That's going to be the working group. Mary, any last comments you want to make before I entertain a motion to adjourn?
Do we have a next meeting date? Let me just check on that one.
We don't. That's a good point. So we have an so will you be able to get this overlay out, this, what put down on a text thing and like a calendar? With the
Sure.
timeframe, a master calendar that has the stuff you're doing, and maybe the working groups can give an overlay of what their time frame is, the different activities. If you have one schedule for that, that would be really helpful. So the right and left hand know, what's happening. In terms of a meeting date for the full board, I don't know. It sounds like is May 18th way too far out? Is May 25th? What are people's pleasures? What do you think, Mary?
Well, I can't make the 18th, but the 25th would work for me, and it probably would be a good time to really share some of my findings with the full group.
Is that okay with folks? That's a Wednesday. Can we make that work?
I was going to say, my thought was I'd be curious to hear what the meeting went like between the two central staffs.
Yeah,
That, to me, sets the foundation for a lot of things. And so I'd be curious what Mary found out at that point. So whenever that eventually occurs, I would think we wouldn't have to have all staff meetings before we saw Mary again, because that might take too long. It'd be nice to get one chunk discussed out of the way and then let Mary move on.
That's only 3 weeks away. Wait a minute, I take that back. 1, 2, 3, that's 4 weeks away.
A month away.
no, well, okay.
Mary, when are you meeting with the superintendents?
Well, I am hoping that I will have met, I've spoken with both of them, but I hope I'm just looking at my calendar here. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Yeah,
I thought you were meeting with them.
May. With both administrative staffs, we're hoping it's going to be the 5th of May, but I need to get that confirmed.
It's with the whole staff group, not just the superintendents?
No, it's just with the administrative staffs. I've spoken with both of the superintendents, but they wanted me to speak with their central office staffs.
Okay.
And Brian had suggested that be the meeting, and Patricia said, well, I want to have my staff meet first with you. So that's going to, that postpones it a little bit, but I'm hoping we're going to be able to do it around at least that week of, I think it's the 2nd of May. We'd been talking about the 3rd, but apparently Pioneer Valley is in interviews a number of days that week, I think. So
Yeah, so if in that event, I mean, you have to meet with Pioneer by themselves, and then you're going to have a joint meeting,
right.
and all of that will be accomplished by,
Hopefully the 5th of May, right.
okay. All right.
Want to try the 11th? Want to try Wednesday, the 11th?
Well, is this something we're going to be discussing with Mary, or do we just want to be kept informed of what happens? I'm just wondering if Mary sent us a report of kind of how she's doing, how things went, is that good enough before the 25th?
It might be easier for Mary to discuss rather than to write out this whole thing to send out to everyone.
Well,
I would say whatever's easier for Mary.
I think sending something out, and that will help me keep on top of it all and make sure I've got it all collected. It would also give all of you the opportunity to kind of review it and give me any feedback that you want.
So why don't we plan on that, and we'll meet on the 25th, and we'll have that information to to think about. I mean, it's certainly going to be interesting because you're talking to two staffs which would be combined. And so some of those folks, we don't need 2 superintendents and 2 business administrators and 2 treasurers and so forth. So it'd be interesting to see how those conversations go.
Excuse
Yeah.
me. The 25th is annual town meeting in Bernardston.
Thank you. Okay. How about the Tuesday, the 24th? Is that one's town meeting?
I have a conflict that night, I'm afraid, unless we made it pretty late.
Go back to did we say the 18th wasn't gonna work?
What
Oh,
about
you
the,
have conflict.
Alan, what about the 26th, the Thursday?
What about another
Tuesday.
day that Mary's available?
Yeah, that one doesn't work for me either.
okay.
How about the 19th?
Pioneer meets. What about the 17th? Tuesday.
17th, so I've got interviews those nights. Now it starts at 4. It may not go to, I don't think that's going to work for me.
Tell us what will work for you.
Okay. Really busy time. The 12th. It's earlier.
We've got a school committee meeting that night,
Okay.
Pioneer.
And the 10th is too early, I think. Well,
People want to try to do a Friday on the 20th?
No,
Okay.
you know, I already have about 5 meetings a week. That's my average now. If I add in Fridays, no way.
is there a way you could do it earlier or later? Let's
When you
see.
say later, like 7 o'clock instead of 6:30?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Let's see. You said not the 12th. I mean, I could do it probably at 7:30 on the 18th, but I would be remote.
Okay. How's
Yeah,
that with folks?
That's okay.
7:30? Okay. 7:30 on the 18th.
That's fine.
All right.
Great.
Thank you.
May,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
All right.
Okay, any other business that needs to be discussed? I am not seeing any, so
I move
I'll
we
entertain a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
So
Deb
moved.
has made a motion,
Second,
seconded by Karen.
Aye.
Alan Genovese, yes. Greg,
Aye.
Jane,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Karen,
yes.
Deb,
Yep.
Meryl, Lynn,
Yes.
and David.
Yes.
All right, we're good
Thanks,
to go.
David.
All right.
All right.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you,
everybody.
David.
Thank
Deb,
Glad to
you,
be a
everybody.
warm
everybody.
body here.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, bye-bye.
All right, thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.